Hi, everyone. My name is Karen Redlener, and I'm one of the co-founders of the Ukraine Children's Action Project. And I want to welcome you to this webinar. And thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for being our supporters and helping us, meet the needs of the kids in Ukraine. So we're excited to have this webinar. There may be a couple of technical difficulties as we go through this, but we will introduce you to a few of the folks that will be speaking, and then we'll have a brief presentation about the work and some of our thoughts about next year. And then at the end of the presentation, we'll be able to take questions and comments and look forward to your input. So now I want to just turn it over. Well, I'll say a little bit more about myself. As I said before, I'm one of the co-founders, along with my husband, Irwin Redlener, of the Ukraine Children's Action Project. And we might refer to that as UCAP during this presentation to make it a little shorter. But Irwin and I have been working together for basically 5 decades, working on in the nonprofit area on the needs of children living in adversity. We founded a Children's Health Fund 35 years ago, have lots of experience in that field, and that's why we were so interested and inspired to start another organization just 18 months ago so that we could help the children of Ukraine. So you'll learn a little bit more about what we do and who we are as we go through, but let me just turn it over now to Irwin, my partner in crime, my partner in life.
Thanks, Karen. And you said 5 decades of working together, did you? Yeah, it's true. A little bit more, but we're not counting. Right. So it's really been a long time. And one of the things that's been great about this whole relationship is that we're able to think about and plan for meeting the needs who are dealing with all kinds of adversity, from homelessness and poverty and other things and post-disaster environments, so that when we were introduced to the challenge of what was happening in Ukraine, we were basically ready to go and receptive to the person who got this whole thing started, who I'm going to introduce in a couple of minutes. But yes, it's been an adventure. It's a very dangerous situation right now for children and families, and we're going to thank you multiple times during this. But the fact of the matter is that we're funding a lot of programs now with your support. Really, literally, I know it's a cliche, but it could not happen without all of you. And for that, we are forever grateful, as are the children who we have the privilege of working with, the kids and their families. But Karen, why don't you go ahead and introduce Yuliia?
Yes. And now I'm so pleased to introduce Yuliia Kardash, who is the regional director for UCAP. She's based in Lviv and has been working with us for over a year now and helping to make things happen on the ground when we're not there. So Yuliia Kardash, please say hi, introduce yourselves.
Just a few words about me, and I'm really very happy to be here today on this webinar. And I work for UCAP for more than a year, and with Ukrainian kids, and I came to UCAP with a range of experiences working with kids as a teacher and working with the Ukrainian families and local organizations. And also I worked as a tour guide in Western Ukraine, meeting people from all over the world. But after the war started, I worked with the media covering the war and helped Ukrainian families to move to safer communities in Poland and other European countries. And now, as a regional director of UCAP, I support Irwin and Karen in identifying and visiting highly regarded Ukrainian organizations and working with children and families and address the needs of the children impacted by the war. And the main thing I would love to say that I really appreciate working for UCAP and appreciate all of the supporters and their help for Ukrainian children. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yuliia. And Irwin, you want to introduce Joan?
I do, but I want to say something else about Yuliia. You know, one of the things we wanted to make sure of from the very beginning of this initiative was that we were extremely visible to the people we're working with in Ukraine, where we, you know, transparency, understanding who's doing what, and accountability are absolutely critical for us. So Karen and I have been to the region, you know, 5 or 6 times now, but Yuliia's there all the time, and she's constantly meeting with the people in the programs that you support, and you know, kind of nothing gets by her. So we're really lucky to have Yuliia as our on the ground eyes and ears, which is great. So I want to say a couple of words about how this whole thing began. I'm just going to say something for just as a reminder. On in February of 2022, February 24th, Russia, after a lot of discussions or assertions or demands, Russia moved into a large portion of Ukraine very aggressively. A lot of troops, a lot of armor, a lot of things that they thought would prevail immediately, that they'd go into Kyiv, the government would fall, and they would control Ukraine. Ukrainians would have none of that. They wanted Russia out of there. They were determined to make sure that none of Russia's aggressions would get fulfilled. And we were watching the news like everybody else and pretty interested to see what was happening. And Zelensky, the president, was all of a sudden rising from his history as, you know, in acting and so on, and became a dynamic, extraordinary force there. And the next thing that happened is one of our really best friends, who Karen and I have known almost since we originally met. We met Joan Baez in 1972 because the clinic that we were running was running out of funds. The government was withdrawing funds from programs that were dealing with poor children in the South. And I randomly reached out to Joan, and she responded. And she came and she did a benefit concert, rescued that clinic, 1972. And we've been really pals ever since then. And then Joan called and she said, you know, she's become a phenomenal painter in addition to her legendary singing and performing and social activism. She's also a very, very talented portrait painter. She says, Irwin, I painted a portrait of President Zelensky. I would like to do something to help Ukrainians. Joan, you'll correct me if I get any of this wrong. And what can we do? So we talked about it. Joan made about, I don't know, 250 prints of this. She sold them literally overnight. She called back and said, we have, you know, over $100,000. What do I do with it? And we said, we're not sure. So Karen and I took off in April. So we went to the region. We were basically, first of all, in Poland, visiting with the many, many Ukrainian children and families who had escaped from the war zones in eastern Ukraine. And that's where they were basically trying to establish themselves for as long as the war was lasting. And Joan stuck with it. We kept her in close touch with what we were doing, with what UCAP was doing. She's really the whole reason that UCAP exists. And then in July, she came with us to Ukraine. And among other things, we visited a lot of programs that Joan visited. She spoke with families and kids. She sang to them. And then we were taken to this city just northwest of the capital of Kyiv. And this was an area that had been occupied by the Russians. And here's one of the many buildings that had been destroyed. And down here, right over here, holding a guitar, is Joan Baez. And she was singing Imagine, I think, at this moment when this picture was taken. And so Joan is completely instrumental to the work that UCAP has been doing. And I just want to introduce her now. Our dear friend, Joan Baez. And Joan, if you could join us and say a couple of words, that would be great. And yeah,
Yeah,
you're up.
I'll talk about you first, you and Karen. And it's true, we have been friends and co-workers for decades. And when I was in Ukraine, I got a chance to see how an organization should work. You know, that if you want to put your money somewhere, you want to know that it's, you know, it's being used appropriately. And when I traveled with the two of them, I saw them arrive at a place where they had taken part in or funded a program. And then the questions to the people who are running it. And literally, if everything in that place didn't live up to, wasn't up to snuff and doing what it's supposed to be doing, it didn't get refunded. I mean, it's what we dream of when we want to send money to the right place. And because I know Irwin and Karen all these years, that's what they've been doing, but I've never seen it in action. You know, to walk into one of the programs you started and start, you know, picking holes in everything to make sure that it's doing what it's supposed to do properly. And that was quite something, not to mention the entire trip into Ukraine with them. And meeting Yuliia, without whom I don't know how we would have gotten anywhere. She did all the translating and knew everybody and knew the places. And it was, thank you, Yuliia. I didn't get a chance to thank you, really. So. Well,
that's really great. And Joan is going to have to leave in a little bit, but Joan, be okay if you took a couple of questions from the folks that are listening in?
Absolutely, it'd be fine. Thank you.
Great. So we're going to use the raise hand feature to see if anyone has a comment or question for Joan. Please raise your hand. Oh, come on. Don't be shy. We won't even see you. You can ask a question. I think Carol has a question.
I was just wondering, you know, as a lifelong pacifist, someone who I've adored, I wondered how it must have been hard for you to be near war.
Let me answer that by saying that this whole looking through children's eyes in Ukraine or anywhere, the pacifism is there. And one looks constantly for alternative things to do. And until you find them on a political level, I really think you have to find them on a humanitarian level. That's the only way to continue functioning, because it won't be right for a pacifist. It won't be right for anybody until it's over. But in the meantime, there are these things that are terribly important to do. And that's why I linked up with this gang that's with us today.
Well, thank you very much. That's a very thoughtful answer.
Yeah, you know, and I actually wanted to ask a question myself, just to remind myself, Joan, what was it about what was happening? There's a lot of crises around the world. I mean, literally, but something triggered your particular interest in this. And if you remember, what was it in particular that made you pay attention to what was happening in Ukraine? If you could say a word about that.
Yeah, whatever else was going on in all of us, in our hearts and minds, watching this, which is like a magnet for so many people. For me, in the end, you know, I've painted all of these people who've made social change through nonviolence. I would say I never thought I'd be painting a war hero. And it's all in spite of what he has had to do. It's in spite of, I mean, somebody said the only good thing that comes out of a violent revolution comes in spite of the violence. And so in a sense, I was amazed at his courage. I think courage is contagious, the same way violence is, and the more we can weigh the scales for courage. And he was an example to the world of somebody who really completely put his life on the line, where it still is. And I was mesmerized, really. So I mean, that's what triggered the painting. and then getting more involved in it and, you know, doing benefits and then eventually talking to Irwin and Karen and going all the way into Ukraine.
Yeah, you know, it was, I think people may have been actually surprised that this guy would emerge who, you know, would be responding in the way that he responded. Really was truly inspiring. I don't think that happens that much in our world. And I, you know, for his part, he's going to do what he's going to do, and hopefully he'll be successful, and the U.S. will support whatever he needs. But in the meantime, like you say, Joan, this is the children in Ukraine are suffering. They're just suffering, and they had not a damn thing to do with the initiation or the continuance of the war, which is really, really violent and unfortunate that millions of children have actually lost a sense of normalcy in their lives, which we need to try to regroup. But are there other questions that we might have? If not, I think I think, yeah, by the way, I'll just say one quick anecdote. When we were in this, Karen, what's the name of this city again?
Borodianka?
Borodianka. We were there, and Joan sang a couple of songs, and one of them kind of work out the lyrics because she sang a verse in Ukrainian. And I remember looking in the back of the car, there was Yuliia and Joan going over the correct pronunciations of the Ukrainian words, and it was just kind of a little bit heartwarming, and it was just absolutely beautiful when it manifested itself in this city. So, all right, well, I'm just gonna move along. Thank you, Joan, and
Thank you, Joan, so much.
I'll stay on with you guys for a while.
Okay, great.
Okay, great. Okay, so let me move on. I'm going to talk some more about some of the issues that we've been dealing with. First of all, as I said, Russia invaded on February 22nd of 22. Joan painted this portrait in a month later in March, and then Karen and I were in Poland, starting to get into this on the 22nd of in April of 22. And then we formalized the Ukraine Children's Action Project, UCAP, which, you know, in order to be tax deductible and so on, we have to meet all kinds of criteria. And we have a fiscal sponsor. Some of you may have seen the reference on our website to Entertainment Industry Foundation, EIF, and because they take care of all of the back office stuff for us, which means keeping us absolutely focused on what has to be done in terms of criteria for actually distributing the money. They take a very, very low overhead, which we're very happy about. It would have been very difficult for us to set this up independently, but EIF has been great. Just so you know, they started in the 40s representing artists and well-known people who wanted to give money to help a particular cause, but didn't want to go through the mechanisms of actually setting up a foundation. That's what they do, and they're great at it. And that's why you'll see EIF on our website in various places. So then we had to come up with a mission. And the mission, succinctly put, and I'm sure many of you have already seen this, but UCAP, we work with local officials and non-governmental organizations in Lviv, Ukraine, and host countries outside of Ukraine. And the goal is to make sure that the health, the education, the well-being of Ukrainian children is sustained as much as possible. And, you know, I've already talked about on the ground and hands-on and transparent, which are the hallmarks of the stuff of how we operate. But I'm telling you, the challenge for these children, and the reason we have a pretty broad agenda, is because everything has been undermined for them. Their ability to get health care, their ability to get mental health care, the ability to just continue school as they should be, to have social interactions. Many of the children obviously are grieving over the loss of their dads and brothers and fathers and grandfathers who are actually on the front lines. There's been quite a few fatalities, obviously, so grieving on a very personal level, in addition to being disoriented from massive disruption makes it very, very challenging. Even teachers in schools that kids may be going to in Ukraine, but also outside Ukraine, are looking out into their classroom and seeing children who are suffering from trauma, and some of them have significant consequences psychologically from the trauma. And one of the things that Karen did.
Irwin,
Yes.
I want to say something about that. The group
Please.
that we visited with those kids, and I sang, and we watched these very imaginative ways of keeping these children who are, in a traumatized state, but to keep them playing all day and being active all day long. And I sang and we hung out. And then when it was time to say goodbye, they piled in for a hug. I mean, every kid. And I thought, well, this is interesting. It says something about the Ukrainian people. Well, part of their program, part of their agenda was hugging. You had to hug. I was so impressed by that, because they would hug each other and they would hug us, and how vital that is, and how easy it would have been to miss that. But I was impressed and warmed by that, by those hugs.
Yeah, you reminded me, it was very emotional to see that, actually. It was like you sang, they were singing with you, they were clapping. And then when it was done, like Joan was saying, they ran over it. There was like just a bunch of children, arms around each other, around Joan. It was even thinking about it right now, it's like it was a really special experience. But thanks for that, Joan. That's a really important element of the humanity of doing this kind of humanitarian work. The reason that humanitarian has the word humanity in it is because people tap into the things that people need. And it's not just food and water and medical care. It is emotional connection. It's social interactions. It's a sense that you are valued. Yes, you've been affected by this war or this disaster, but you are valued. And that's one of the things that we cherish in the programs that we're doing. A couple of facts here you might be interested in. So Ukraine's population before the war was 43 million, more or less. Only 7.5 million of their total population are children, which is it's about 17.5%, which is relatively small. The US has about 25% of our population are children. So when 5 million children were among the refugees or the internally displaced children whose lives were disrupted, that's a large percentage of the total 7 million kids. So the problems are very significant, which is one of the reasons that we try to do these creative programs. We're supporting almost 30 now, but we're also working with the government of Ukraine. Okay, so we're doing a great program. How are we going to expand this? How are we going to scale up to reach more children than the ones we're just reaching with our programs? Our programs are models. And as we get results and collect data about how they're doing, this is what we say to the government. We got to scale this up. All kids need this. Refugees, I don't want to dwell on this, but a lot of people who had to leave or either were in one of these countries before had to stay there. But Poland had almost a little more than 3.5 million refugees coming. There were almost 7 million altogether people, adults and children, who left. In Poland, by the way, and this is really from our first trip there in April, we had a lot of opportunities to do things like this. Is a classroom in a Warsaw high school there were two classes like this, entirely comprised of Polish high school, of Ukrainian high school students that were now in school, trying to learn in Polish, not a language that they were necessarily familiar with. There were translators, and the Polish government and the school system were trying very hard to make things work for these kids. It was pretty impressive. We visited railroad stations where families would be coming in by train. They'd be greeted when they got to the station by organizations that would immediately embrace them, provide all kinds of activities for the kids until they found placement for them. This is a medical station operated by the Norwegian Refugee Council that we had a chance to visit with. And these are just some of the other scenes that we saw. These are for some number of days, kids and families would be staying in these what's called congregate shelters until they got placed somewhere. And this is just a family that we hung out with a bit at one of the shelters.
Irwin, hang on one sec.
Sure,
I needed to go. I wanted to say thank you
of course.
to everybody and carry on. Talk soon.
Thank you, Joan.
Thanks so much, Joan.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye, Joan. So one of the challenges we're facing, it has to do with scale again. So let's say there were more or less 600,000 Ukrainian children, school-age children in Poland. We know that about 200,000 of them are in schools in Poland, studying in Polish. The other 400,000, some were actually, there's a few that are actually going to Ukrainian schools in Poland. Some are learning online. Some are not learning anywhere. And this is a situation we're very worried about. And those of you who may be familiar with this know that long absences from school really has a detrimental effect on children's ability to succeed ultimately academically and then later in life. It's a really big problem. We could talk about this more if you have questions later, but I just want to get through some more of these. Now, inside Ukraine, a lot of people left the east where the Russians had invaded and occupied and were moving to the west. And a lot of displaced children and families were actually in the Lviv region, is why we opened an office in Lviv in Western Ukraine and found Ukraine to actually found Yuliia to run that office, which has been incredible. But that's why we're based right now there. These are just people that were displaced, Russian occupied areas into various parts of Ukraine. And in Ukraine, okay. We've been very, very busy in Ukraine. And, as a pediatrician, I think some, I'm very interested and was interested in seeing how children are doing in a variety of ways. This is me talking to a group of pediatricians at this beautiful, not beautiful physically, but a phenomenally wonderful, highly competent children's hospital in Lviv. And I'm talking to them about some of the issues we're seeing. This is in one of the main hospitals, sandbags everywhere protecting the windows because of the constant attacks. This is Karen and I and Yuliia. You're there someplace. I don't know. Maybe you took this picture, but we're talking to the governor of the Lviv region. Here, this is a member of the Ukraine Parliament who's head of the Education Committee, and we've become quite close to her as we distribute lots of things for school children, again, with your support. Here I am making rounds, visiting with children in the hospital and talking about it here on something MSNBC, I guess. This is a decontamination set up by that main hospital in Lviv. So in case there was a chemical or gas attack, that would be, this would be able to help decontaminate people that was affected by gas or chemical agents. I just want to tell you that, as a pediatrician, one of the things I did early in my life was running large pediatric intensive care unit in Miami. And so I'm very interested in what was happening medically, and the stories they're just heartbreaking, but the kids were amazing. They were like Zelensky. They're courageous, they're stalwart. These two kids and their mother were leaving from a community far east in Ukraine that was getting attacked severely. They'd gone to the station to leave to come to Western Ukraine, and a missile hit the train station. These are twins, these children. Mom had said to this guy, go get some snacks for the trip, and he did. Meanwhile, the mother, severely injured, this young 11-year-old lost both of her legs and was in a rehab unit there, and they were incredible. This kid became like, the family organizer while his mom was recovering and his sister was recovering. but this is story after story of heroic Ukrainians, normal Ukrainians and children. So the process, I'm not going to belabor this, but it starts with when the Russians attacked, lots of fear, uncertainty, people losing homes, feeling the grief I talked about before. For in the immediate time right after the invasion, people were not getting food or health care. And in essence, this is the big point that we keep emphasizing. These children suddenly lose a sense of normalcy. When I talk about normalcy, I mean the things every one of you is used to and expect for your own kids. They go to school, they have friends, they play in the playground, they go to clubs, they go to listen to music, whatever they do, this disappears. This disruption is very difficult. And one of the things that Karen and I are really concerned about is, will all this have an effect long term? Will this become generational? And we can talk about that later if you want to ask about it. But I just want to get through this. So the areas of concern for us generally from the beginning have been children who were psychologically traumatized, children whose education was disrupted. And don't forget, schools in Ukraine, like here, were closed for almost 2 years because of the pandemic. Then comes the war. So we're seeing children for 3 or 4 years have not been going to school regularly. You can imagine the impact of that. The health needs we've talked about, humanitarian assistance, which we've done a lot of. This year, this winter is going to be a nightmare. The Russians are promising more intense attacks on Ukrainian infrastructure, meaning that electrical heating shortages of all types will be horrendous this year. And we're going to have another campaign to try to raise more money to help with on the humanitarian side. And then awareness of what's going on in Ukraine and eventually the recovery. I just want to spend a minute on awareness. We are all, Yuliia, Karen and I, and others who are involved with us, we're very, very worried that the focus on Ukraine now, there's a lot of competition, there's a lot of politics that have interfered with what we think needs to be done. And part of my personal responsibility here is trying to get the word out there. And I think some of you may have seen a note from me saying, in addition to everything else, and believe me, the funds are appreciated and they get spent, I think, appropriately. If you feel like it, I think it'd be really helpful if you just contact your member of Congress, House or Senate, and you could just leave a message, or you can send an email. But if you leave a message, even with the receptionist in the office of your member of Congress, they will report it to the actual member. We got a call from 10 constituents today, and they want you to pass this aid to Ukraine. This is like a side commercial from a longtime advocate, and I think that'd be helpful if you feel like doing that. So, Karen, let me go back to you, if you don't mind, if you can go through some of the specifics.
Yes. Okay. Thank you so much. We got a good sense from Irwin about how we began to learn about Ukraine, how we spent our first couple of trips meeting potential partners and speaking to different organizations that work with children, and began, and even at that early stage, helped us understand what the needs are and potential ways that we could focus our funds and our effort. And so, of course, addressing psychological trauma for everyone that, had to experience that horrible invasion, and especially those on the eastern part of the country. But those first visits to schools that we made in Poland actually introduced us to the fact that teachers did not have the tools, they didn't have the skills to know how to work with children who had been so extremely traumatized by that life experience. There were kids sitting in classrooms that wouldn't speak, that were crying, that were angry. And so one of the things that we did is to ask them if a course for teachers would be helpful in trauma. and the impact of trauma on children, on their brain, on their behavior, and some of the ways that they might see behavior in the classroom and how to address it. So, one of our larger impact programs is the development of this online interactive teachers training course. It's in Ukrainian and it's also in Polish to help the teachers there. And we work with the Department of Education in both Ukraine and in Lviv and in Warsaw to have this course online and to make it available to as many teachers as possible. So this is being distributed. We worked with Columbia University to develop this course, and I think close to 3,000 teachers have taken the course already. And then the picture to the side, another program that we love, that we think is fantastic, the recovery camps. This is a program that Joan visited, that she just referred to, about how loving and how positive the environment is for children as they come and try to experience normal life. And one of the great things about this and our relationship here is that we loved the concept of the program, but we also noticed that the protocols for identifying the kids that might have greater psychological needs than others were not as structured as we thought, would be, best practice based on our kind of years of experience in the nonprofit children's world. So they were very amenable to us recommending things. Our grants over the past year have gone to support the camps in general. We've funded 49 camps, both 1-day and 6-day camps, and also a full-time psychologist and assistant so that they could begin to screen more predictably for PTSD. And they have found that 1 in 5 children who attend these camps do have symptoms of PTSD, and they have psychologists on site to help them and their moms, and then also make referrals for follow-up. So it's a wonderful and developing camp, and we're very proud to support it. And we have a video here. It's kind of a thank you video to us, where it's just a minute long, where we can, I think, be able to play it for you. Great. So that gives you just a minute's worth of the feeling at the recovery camp. You can see the hugging was really important, and the mental health support as part of that. Most of those families either relocated, were internally displaced from the East, or are still living actually near the war zone. So a very supportive intervention. And the other area, of course, that we spend a lot of time and grant support is to education. So many of the kids were, as Irwin said, they missed school during COVID, but during the war, many of the schools were destroyed on the eastern side. Many of the schools didn't have a basement or a shelter where children could go when the air alerts came on, so those schools will not be able to be used. Internet access is difficult even for online learning. There are so many challenges. So we try to deal with access to the educational resources that were available. And so we have been funding tablets, computer tablets for kids who are trying to learn online, where their textbooks are only online, not able to be, given out in person. We funded school buses in districts that were, really affected by the initial invasion and where a lot of vehicles were stolen and destroyed. This was north of Kyiv. We funded multi-boards, this interactive whiteboards. We've really supported the access to education in school. And we worked with the member of parliament that Irwin pointed out on a previous slide, whom we met on one of our first visits, and she's on the education committee and really helped us understand what the needs were. And outside of Ukraine, education for Ukrainian kids is another topic. These kids, especially as time goes on, it's almost 2 years now, they've been outside of Ukraine. They are, as Irwin said, many of them if they're going to school, they are learning a different language. They are learning the history and the literature of another country, and they have the potential for losing their connections, emotional and academic, to their home country, to Ukraine. So what we try to focus on is summer experiences, camps for Ukrainian kids outside of the country. So in Poland, in Hungary, and in the Czech Republic, we have partnerships with programs that either support a Ukrainian school, a Ukrainian weekend school to catch up and prepare for their online learning, or a camp that helps them, remember their language and their culture. We've really excited about a couple of big capital projects and new programs that UCAP has really helped make a difference on. The one on the left is a new dorm and program for orphan youth. They're vulnerable, displaced, and orphan youth. In Ukraine, there's a lot of disruption to the institutions that cared for children, mostly in kind of old-fashioned orphanages. But they, in the last 10 years, have been really changing the model and the protocol to support kids to smaller institutions, smaller family-run centers. And this particular program has a lot of experience working with orphan youth, and many of them were kind of taken in from the eastern part of Ukraine to Lviv in the west. And so they were developing a big program, a dormitory for some children, 20 children to live for 2 years, getting the social, psychological, educational support that they need to be able to, live independently and productively. And then we're supporting a program, a community-based program that engages another 200 kids in learning life skills that will make them independent. And I just want to point out that this program, we got involved with this program at the request of a donor for UCAP. She and her family were very interested in finding a high-quality program to serve orphans, and she and her relatives were, interested in giving a significant grant to help make a big difference. And you can see Joan visited this site, and the grand opening was a couple of weeks ago when Irwin and I were in Lviv. We got to attend it, Yuliia and I. And so this is now operational for 220 very vulnerable youth, and they have a home now and a connection to a community that was not there before. And the pictures on the right is our other big capital project that we were excited to have another grand opening to go to in November. A new, what they call Kids Club. This is a model in Ukraine where it's an after-school program for school-age kids. It's a preschool program for pre-K kids, and it's a center for activities, for classes, and also we wanted it to be also have resources for educational tutoring for the kids that are falling behind, and to have as many services, psychological if necessary, educational, cultural, that kids could enjoy in a neighborhood that was really serving low income and displaced families. So I have another quick video to show you about the grand opening. This was the day of the grand opening when 160 kids signed up for services. And because of Yuliia, we met the director of this program and learned about her ideas of what she could do, you know, with the right kind of support to expand services for kids in Lviv. And so it's been a team effort, and we have also some donors that very specifically helped with certain aspects of that construction based on their interests. And it was just a wonderful experience to see that that will be there forever now. You know, it's funding that we were able to invest in something that will have a legacy. So moving on to humanitarian needs, I think Irwin mentioned a lot of this. We have funded, I think it was like 175 generators for community sites, for schools, and even the recovery camp program. We supported wooden stoves in areas that didn't even have electricity, so they couldn't use generators. The stoves helped them with
Wood burning stoves, yeah.
Wood burning stoves, right, for destroyed communities outside of Kyiv, and a lot of humanitarian response, just general support for winter clothes, for food supplies, and general for internally displaced families. The critical health care that Irwin mentioned, you know, we developed this fantastic relationship with the St. Nicholas Children's Hospital in Lviv, and we have a number of different projects that we're supporting in this hospital. These up on the upper left are 2 physicians from Ukraine that we sponsored to spend a month in New York City Children's Hospital, learning some of the latest techniques for pediatric subspecialty needs, and also teaching some of the New York doctors some unique procedures that they had more experience in, especially around.
Yeah, that picture, by the way, Karen pointed out that at the bottom here on the left is actually the hospital in New York City that these docs from Lviv come to share experiences with colleagues. And it's called the Children's Hospital at Montefiore, which is a major children's hospital in the Bronx in New York City. And these 2 guys, as Karen pointed out, these 2 women were, I think, one of the original 6 that came through there.
Right.
But the other picture on the other side of that is in Lviv Children's Hospital.
On the right
Yep.
lower, yes. So we're working to raise funds to help them renovate their inpatient child psychiatric unit. We're helping support the new children's mental health outpatient unit, and you know, continuing to partner with this really wonderful organization in Lviv. And then the upper photo reflects a new relationship with a hospital that's closer to the front line in an area, region called Dnipro. We are now starting to work with Dnipro Children's Hospital to develop a telehealth network of technology to help children out in the smaller towns get access to the subspecialty care they need through this telehealth unit. So we're excited about that as a new project we're working on. And then, as Irwin mentioned, our model over the years has always been to develop programs, develop services, serve as many children as we can, but also Irwin's commitment to a broader advocacy agenda, using the media and partnerships to bring the, the information that we learn about needs, about solutions, models of care to a broader, larger audience, so that there can be some scale. And so his ability to, to appear on MSNBC, and I'm sure many of you saw him originally from some of those interactions. This is, Joan and Irwin went on CNN when we were there with her over the summer, and we are also partnering with the Clinton Global Initiative that has brought together many Ukraine-focused organizations to help collaborate and help raise money for. So a lot of media, important, important to keep the word out so that people can hear more about that work. And then just a few facts. I know some of you are interested in some of the facts that kind of summarize our work over the last 18 months. And just to thank you all again for your contributions and being part of this wonderful donor network. We have about almost 13,000 donors that have heard about us over the years, and we've raised about $3.8 million in this last 18 months. We funded 29 projects, including 6 capital projects, and some were one-time funding, especially the capital, and as smaller programs, and others are continuing. So we continue to fund, expansion of those services. We've impacted, nearly 30,000 children, teachers, and parents with all these different programs and resources. We have our Lviv office and Yuliia, thank goodness. And we try to keep you all posted with a newsletter that goes out on a monthly basis to help keep you informed about how we're using your money and what the issues are that we think are very important. And of course, the ongoing media broadcasts and op-eds that Irwin focuses on so often. And so, that's kind of what we've accomplished today. And now Irwin's going to talk a little bit about what we hope to do in the coming year.
Yeah, before that, I just want to, I'm going back to this slide. And the reason I'm looking a little exhausted here is that this was Joan and I on the roof of the hotel we were staying in Lviv, Ukraine, and we were woken at about 2 a.m. with air raid sirens. We went back down to the shelter, and I was called by a friend of ours in Kyiv and said, "Take this seriously. You have 6 or 7 cruise missiles headed your way there." And we spent a few quality hours down in the shelter in the basement, but by 8 o'clock in the morning, we were up and talking to CNN. But anyway, this is one of the things that we're just really focused on, keeping the word out there that we got plenty of work to do here. I'm not going to belabor this. We're going to send out more information about plans for 2024. But we're going to continue to, assuming we're successful in continuing to raise money, we're going to continue to fund a lot of the programs we already have, but also identify new programs as new needs emerge. And we're going to start really thinking about recovery. Even though the war is obviously still ongoing, it's absolutely not too soon to talk about what this country is going to need to recover, and not just recovery or rebuilding of infrastructure and buildings that were destroyed, but also of the culture, of life, of normalcy, of schools. A couple of thousand schools have been damaged in Ukraine. There's a lot of work that's going to have to be done here. And we need to continue the awareness that we've been talking about here in the West and in the U.S. particularly. And here's something you can help us with. If other people would like to participate in this work, we'd be obviously very welcoming of not only your support, but anybody else that you might want to try to connect us to. And we're very available to people, as you're probably already aware. And like Karen said, we'll continue to keep you updated. But why don't we move now to see if there's any questions that we have. This is this American Federation of Teachers. RIDNY is one of the programs for orphans that Karen showed you, and so on. So there's a lot going on. Karen is actually on the education subcommittee for Poland of UNICEF. So we're deep into this, and very, very happy to be, and very appreciative. But
Yeah, now we have time for questions.
Yeah.
We're happy to, answer any questions. If you have any comments, any feedback, anything that you would like us to know or think about, we would very much be happy to address any questions that you have.
Peter Joseph here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yeah,
can.
good. All right. Hi. It's nice to see you both again. It's only been about 30 years since PSR days. I don't have a question, except how do you find the courage to do what you're doing? I just want to express how thankful I am and impressed that you've got the guts to go there into a war zone. I admire the Ukrainian people, where my grandmother was born about 130 years ago, for their fight and their will to live under the kind of circumstances that they have to. I cannot imagine it myself. All I worry about here in California is earthquakes, not missiles. And I just want to thank you for all you're doing. It's very, very impressive, and I'm very happy to support it.
Well,
we
thank you
really
so much.
appreciate the words and the support, Peter. It's I don't know. It's I think people get concerned about an issue, and there's many ways of acting on that concern, from donating, even paying attention to what's going on in the world is important. And for us, we're kind of obsessed with trying to make sure that what we're doing over there is fulfilling the promise that they make when we give them other people's money. And we feel a lot of responsibility about that. And the other thing is, you go there and you see children and families absolutely thriving. So who are we to be nervous about it when you got these incredibly resilient 10-year-olds and 14-year-olds who are trying to do their thing? It's humbling, actually. And that's really, it's important, man. It's not like we're oblivious to what's going on. I mean, plenty of places I would like to go that Karen won't let me in the country, much farther east. But when the air raid sirens go off, we go down in the basement like everybody else does and go into the shelter, and then it clears in X number of minutes, and we come up and go about our business, which is really what the whole country does. So you're in an environment where you're not the only one that's dealing with these things. In fact, we get to go home to the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and they don't. So anyway, thank you, Peter, very much, and we'll, I'm sure, be in touch.
Any other questions or comments? I'd love to hear what they think of the newsletter. Oh, Jerry.
Hello there, can I be heard?
Yes.
Wonderful, thank you. The presentation that you've been giving today is actually quite wonderful. It has answered a lot of questions that we had on our side here at the Tuscan Kitchen as one of the supporters. I do have a question on the topic of awareness and bringing exposure to UCAP and the things that you are doing for Ukrainian children is well, for example, this particular presentation has been absolutely wonderful. Are you planning to post it anywhere, maybe somewhere on your website for people that might have had similar questions to myself, or anywhere on your social media, maybe?
Yes, we will. We have been recording it, and we're going to be talking, about the best way to use it. Certainly happy to share it with everyone here. And really take your suggestion to heart. We're happy that you feel that way. And we will definitely see about the best way to, give more people access to it. Thank you. Jan Green.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
First of all, thank you for everything you're doing in our little group in Jamestown, connecting with you and having such a concrete, specific way to donate. We've done a couple of things. We're happy to do all of them, but this has given us a real connection to what's going on, and so it feels very important. On a personal note, I come to this as a pacifist and a sort of environmental person, and I know that they have to defend themselves. They have to keep fighting, to do whatever it takes.
Yeah.
In trying to explain this to some of the people in my circle, sometimes they see support of Ukraine as just prolonging the war. And if you could give me a couple of sentences or something to really talk to people who very much are good-hearted and want to see peace in the world, but don't understand that this is a very, I don't want to say different because things like this have happened in other parts of the world, but that Ukraine must continue to fight against this for their survival and really to help the rest of the world too, I think.
So,
Wait, Irwin. I'd like, Yuliia, would you like to respond to that?
Yeah, yes, of course. I have a very short answer for your question that answers very briefly, but people will understand. If Russia stops fighting, there will be no war. If Ukraine stops fighting, there will be no Ukraine. The other thing that we try to live kind of normal life, to come back to the normalcy, like in the morning you drink a cup of coffee and you have breakfast, but then suddenly you see the news and like the friends you meet because someone came here to live for a couple of days and they're really very frightened because there was a night attack on Kiev at 3 a.m. and lots of buildings. This was just this night, and for 2 days we had cyber attack. We were without mobile connection at all for 2 days. One of the provider just collapsed, and but we still tried to keep going. But the first phrase actually answers, it seems to me, I don't know, maybe I'm not mistaken, but this is kind of a feeling. And I will use also the opportunity while I'm talking. I want to thank you for the support of art studio, because this is really this is something amazing when I see those kids coming there. Thank you for your support.
Thank you, Yuliia.
Yeah.
that was wonderful, Yuliia, and I think that what you just said, the first thing you said was if Russia stops fighting, there'll be no war. If Ukraine stops fighting, there'll be no Ukraine. I think that's really the kind of the bottom line. But the other thing I was just going to add is that, Joan Baez has been focused on nonviolence and peace since she was a teenager, which is a long time ago. And she had a lot of discussions with people in her circle also about what this means. And I think she came to the same conclusion that Yuliia just expressed. And it's really a matter of survival. It's not like Ukraine went into Russia for some sort of nefarious need. It's Russia who brought weapons into beautiful, civilized cities in their country and started destroying them. And I think this is, for people who are in the pacifist movement, this is an existential question of what is it that you're supposed to do. And I know Joan has struggled with this while she was there. She was speaking to people in her community of pacifism, and more happened when she got back, but nobody really had an answer or could really have a counter argument to the self-defense of a country that wanted to live in peace. And don't forget, this is also a democracy, full stop, a democracy that is being threatened by an autocracy, totalitarian government. And it's in, everyone's interest, including obviously Ukraine, but other countries as well, to make sure that the basic principles of democracy, peaceful living and development of a country can keep going. But it's a really, really important question.
The other thing I think that's important to note is that UCAP is focusing on the needs of children and families under this very difficult circumstances. We don't, personally, we're hoping for Ukrainian victory, but our work and the funds go to support the needs of children and families who are just trying to live through this difficult time. So it's
Thank you.
separate.
Yeah, thank you for all of your answers. And certainly that's what Jamestown Ukraine Relief is focused on too, is children and families and the humanitarian side of it. But at the same time, I have found myself in conversations with pacifists who I know well and care about, and usually we're in sync. We're like, the US has to stop giving aid. And I know that's not your issue, but it's something I want to be able to speak well to. And Yuliia, you gave me a perfect 4 words or 6 words that really sum it up.
Thank you, Jan.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you all. We're always available to answer questions or get your comments. And thank you for attending today. And thank you so much for your support.